Imagine for a moment that the man who gave you life, the one who should have been your first refuge, decides to abandon you before you even learn to pronounce his name clearly. Imagine that years later, an entire country mocks your broken heart as you cry in front of cameras at your doorstep, and that at the sweetest moment of your youth, a devastating medical diagnosis threatens not only your professional future but also your own femininity and your ability to give life. This is not just the story of a famous singer who has sold millions of records. It is the raw, dramatic, and sometimes cruel tale of a true survivor who had to learn to build an iron armor because the world repeatedly tried to see her shattered into 1,000 pieces. Stay with me, because today we are going to uncover the truth behind the gaze of Maria Laura Corradini, the woman who had to invent the name Chenoa so that no one else could hurt her again. I assure you that after learning the details of her silent struggle, you will never see her the same way again. It all began in the coastal city of Mar del Plata, Argentina, on June 25, 1975. Maria Laura was not born into a peaceful and harmonious home but in the midst of a family storm that had been written in destiny before her first cry. Her parents, Patricia Falomir and José Carlos Corradini, were two young musicians, bohemian and full of dreams. But their love evaporated long before little Laura could even remember them together in the same room. José Carlos, a man who defined himself as a free spirit, an 18-year-old imbued with a hippie philosophy and detached from material ambitions, soon clashed with the reality of a family that needed stability. Maria Laura's mother's family had a higher economic status thanks to restaurant businesses, and the cultural and class clash between the parents was the first spark of disaster. Tension in that Mar del Plata home exploded quickly, and before Maria Laura turned 1, her biological father turned around and left, leaving behind a young woman with 2 small children and an uncertain future. It was not a temporary goodbye or a "see you later," full of promises. It was an immense void that would last for decades. José Carlos Corradini's abandonment was not only a physical absence but a total emotional and financial disconnection that would mark the next 5 decades of the artist's life. Imagine the weight on Patricia's shoulders, the mother, suddenly alone, without the support of the man who had helped create this life, forced to sing wherever she could to buy diapers and food. Years later, José Carlos would claim, when his daughter's fame had become a profitable business for gossip shows, that in those early years there had been correspondence, but he himself decided to cut it off under the pretext of not wanting to prolong the suffering of a distant communication that could not be carried out due to financial hardship. This unilateral decision to erase ties left little Maria Laura in a paternal identity limbo. She grew up knowing that there was a man somewhere in the world who shared her blood but had no interest in knowing whether she was cold, hungry, or crying at night. That early wound of abandonment explains many of the walls Chenoa would later build in her adult life. The name given to her at birth, Maria Laura, was influenced by her parents' profession in honor of one of Julio Iglesias' backup singers, linking her destiny to the stage even before she could form her own judgment. The situation in Argentina became increasingly suffocating and unstable. In 1983, when the future star was only 8 years old, her mother made a drastic and courageous decision that would forever change the course of history: to cross the Atlantic and seek a new opportunity. In Spain, specifically on the island of Majorca. It was a move that marked the beginning of a stage of extreme economic hardship and social integration challenges that the singer never forgot. Arriving in Spain was not the fairy tale some might imagine. For Maria Laura, it was a brutal shock. She was no longer just the fatherless child, she was the immigrant child, the foreigner who had to hide her Argentine accent to fit in at school and avoid ridicule from her classmates. Adaptation was far from easy. Chenoa has recounted on multiple occasions how her immigrant status and the family's initial lack of resources forced everyone to work tirelessly, with no rest days and no reprieve. Patricia found work as a singer in Majorca's hotels, where performing was not glamorous art but a raw tool for survival. Maria Laura grew up watching her mother transform each night, dressing in sequins to sing for tourists who often barely paid attention, all to pay rent for a small, humble apartment. In this context of fragility and constant struggle, a figure emerged who would be decisive for the girl's mental and emotional health: Juan Antonio Merino, affectionately known as Toddy by the family. By starting a relationship with Patricia, Tati not only took on the domestic responsibilities of another family but, out of pure love, decided to become the paternal figure Maria Laura had never had in Argentina. This emotional adoption was so deep and authentic that Chenoa, despite pressures and the passage of time, has always publicly acknowledged him as her only true father. She has stated in emotional moments that her soul belongs to him, because Tati chose her and cared for her with absolute, selfless love while her biological father was lost to voluntary oblivion. Chenoa's conscious choice to reject biology in favor of constant presence would decades later unleash the most media-driven and ugly war with her real father. But back then, in 1980s Mallorca, survival and dreaming of a better future were the priority. Maria Laura began studying, training, and although music flowed in her veins like an unstoppable torrent, her mother insisted she have a solid foundation. She eventually graduated as an early childhood education teacher, a facet that shows her grounded nature, someone who knew dreams are built with effort, not just wishes. At 12, she took the stage professionally for the first time. It wasn't a trivial school performance. It was the moment she discovered that under the spotlight, the pain of abandonment and feeling like a stranger in a foreign land disappeared. However, before success came knocking, life struck again with unprecedented cruelty. At 24, while working tirelessly in nightclubs, she was diagnosed with early-stage uterine cancer. The news was a bombshell. Imagine a young woman full of energy, beginning her path, suddenly confronted with the possibility of death or losing her reproductive capacity. She underwent emergency laparoscopic surgeries and oncological treatments, carried out almost in secret to protect her budding career. The emotional impact of facing such a disease shaped her relationship with her own body forever. The consequences were not only physical. Endometriosis and cysts from the interventions drastically reduced her chances of conceiving naturally. For years, the Spanish press, ignoring her private ordeal, relentlessly questioned her about her biological clock and why she hadn't become a mother. With superhuman strength, she processed in solitude the pain of compromised reproductive capacity while her public image projected an invulnerable woman, a woman of iron who needed no one. Do you think it's fair for the press to pressure a woman about motherhood without knowing the health battles she fights in? Silence. I would love to read your opinion in the comments, as this is an issue that has affected many women. Before television catapulted her to national stardom, Chenoa spent an entire decade working under conditions that today would seem unacceptable. From age 16, she pursued music professionally, far from the big stadiums, performing in 6 different casinos and countless bars in Mallorca, where she learned to handle difficult, often drunken and noisy audiences. This period is key to understanding why when we first saw her on television, she was perceived as cold, distant, or overly professional. It wasn't coldness, it was the fatigue of someone who had already accumulated miles on the road, the discipline of someone who knows the show must go on even if the soul is broken or the body is ill. During this time, her personal life was linked to Luis de Pestre, a musician with whom she had a stable relationship. Luis witnessed her deepest ambitions and frustrations before fame, but their relationship became the first casualty of her meteoric rise. When she entered the Operación Triunfo Academy in 2001, Maria Laura was not only leaving her stable casino job in Mallorca but also closing a chapter of anonymity that her partner could neither follow nor support. Entering the TV program on October 22, 2001, was a cultural shock for the audience. At 26, she was more mature and experienced than most peers, earning unfair labels of arrogance or roughness. She didn't go there to make friends, she went to save her life and her family's life through music. However, her efforts and impeccable vocal technique were soon overshadowed by something beyond her control, her volcanic relationship with David Bisbal. Starting as evident on-stage chemistry while performing, Escondidos, their romance captivated a nation and became both her blessing and greatest media curse. Before the scandal of the tracksuit and the breakup that defined an era, we must understand how this love was forged within the Academy walls, where every sigh was recorded. Living 24/7 with someone, sharing fear of failure and hope for success, created an apparently indestructible bond. Chenoa and Bisbal were not just singers, they were symbols of a Spain awakening to a new entertainment era. But while they kissed in the halls, destiny was preparing the stage for the most televised betrayal in history, leaving Maria Laura exposed at her most vulnerable moment. As I told you, the relationship between Chenoa and David Bisbal was more than a romance between two young artists. It had become a national concern, as Spain saw them as heirs to a modern fairy tale. Between 2001 and 2005, they lived 3 years of apparent happiness, moving to Madrid, touring, and collecting awards. Yet behind the velvet curtains and stadium lights, reality became increasingly complex and suffocating. Bisbal's international projection surged, especially in Latin America, keeping him away from Spain for months. Meanwhile, Chenoa consolidated her national career, but with the loneliness of waiting for a call that grew shorter and colder, the physical distance became emotional distance. Rumors of Bisbal's infidelity abroad were constant, but Chenoa, driven by deep love and unwavering loyalty, always defended him. She later confessed living in a parallel world, voluntarily ignoring obvious signs that love was being consumed by fame and third-party ambitions. Then came April 2005, a date etched into the memory of the artist and the nation. The breakup did not result from an honest private conversation. It was much crueler. Chenoa learned she was no longer in a relationship the same way as everyone else, through TV. In a press conference in Caracas, Venezuela, David Bisbal declared he was single and uncommitted. Imagine the impact on a woman who was at that very moment at their shared home, surrounded by memories, clothes, and life together. Her world crumbled in an instant. Desperate, she tried to contact him by phone, only to find the number disconnected. He had changed contacts without warning, cutting off all direct communication and leaving her alone before a horde of journalists seeking the image of her defeat. This led to one of the most iconic, painful, and human scenes in Spanish celebrity press history. Chenoa, broken, eyes swollen from crying, soul in tatters, went to her doorstep to ask the press for respect. She wore a €6 gray tracksuit, no makeup, no star armor, showing absolute vulnerability that forever shattered her image as a cold, calculating woman. This appearance was pure desperation. In her memoir, Defectos Perfectos, she recounts how one of her best friends rescued her from that media storm, calming her with valerian, amid public humiliation. The humiliation didn't end with the breakup. Days later, Bisbal sent workers to collect belongings from their shared home in cardboard boxes, without showing up himself. Chenoa remained in an empty house, heartbroken, labeled for over a decade as the abandoned woman. The press framed her as the loser, while Bisbal thrived globally, ignoring her inner ordeal. Do you think someone who shared 3 years of life with you deserves to be abandoned via a press conference in another country with no prior explanation? Share your thoughts in the comments. The communicative betrayal is something no one should endure. After Bisbal's heartbreak, Chenoa tried to rebuild her romantic life with actor Alex Gonzalez, 2005-2006. What seemed at first a healing relationship became another public controversy due to egos and media pressure. The final breakup occurred at the 2006 Goya Awards, when photographers ignored Gonzalez and demanded Chenoa pose alone. This slight hurt Gonzalez's pride and showed how the partners of female superstars often cannot accept her success. Chenoa said the relationship became a continuous reproach, proving that a woman's professional success can be an insurmountable obstacle for many men. In 2010, Chenoa's love life made headlines again with singer David de Maria. Their romance began professionally during a duet but ended quickly when de Maria left her for his ex. This pattern of abandonment and failed relationships reinforced the media image of Chenoa as Spain's ex, a heavy emotional burden that led her to distance herself from gossip press and focus obsessively on her work. She became a TV judge and collaborator, controlling her narrative and ensuring her professionalism was the only thing judged. Yet in 2016, the ghosts of her past returned. Her biological father José Carlos Corradini appeared after 25 years of silence, claiming on Spanish TV that his daughter was cold and heartless. He even sued for financial support under civil law. Chenoa remained silent, leaving the matter to lawyers, seeking refuge in her real family, mother Patricia and adoptive father Tati. This stage revealed the harsh side of fame, showing how past errors and abandonments can be monetized to damage a public figure's reputation. As I said, Maria Laura's life has been a constant fight to keep her head above water while the world tried to drag her into the mud of controversy. But the blow nobody saw coming was the breakdown of a family that seemed unbreakable. The first Operación Triunfo contestants, once a symbol of pure friendship in Spain, became the stage of a rift that placed Chenoa in the center of attention. The image of unwavering unity shattered in June 2022 over something deeply personal: Chenoa's wedding to prestigious Dr. Miguel Sanchez Encinas. Rosa Lopez, winner of her audition and once considered her soul sister, was not invited. The storm of rumors was devastating. After 20 years of supposed sisterhood, how could she be left out of the most important day of her life? Chenoa responded sharply to the press, breaking the myth of eternal friendship. She said, "Rosa is my companion, but my friends are Chenoa, Gisela, and Natalia." These words were not just headlines, they marked the end of an era of nostalgic TV. The rift dated back to their participation in Tu Cara Me Suena in 2016, caused by tension from Chenoa advising Rosa professionally. This fracture was not only a public image failure but also a controversy showing Chenoa's selective and sometimes strict approach to personal ties. She would no longer pretend for the audience's sake. Loyalty and stability now outweighed any sponsorship or collective nostalgia. Meanwhile, she tried to open the door to lasting happiness with Miguel Sanchez Encinas, a prestigious urologist far from the entertainment world, starting in 2019. After many disappointments with musicians and actors, Chenoa finally seemed to have found peace in a man who did not seek the spotlight. Yet their union was marked by misfortune from the moment they got engaged. The global pandemic of 2020 delayed their wedding for 2 years, an emotionally exhausting period. While her work stalled, he was on the front lines of hospitals. Forced cohabitation and wedding stress tested the foundation of their relationship. Her heartbreaks turned into songs, her silences into strength. She learned that to be happy, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be yourself, even if the whole world is watching and waiting for you to stumble. Do you think, after so many blows and betrayals, Chenoa can fully trust someone again? Or is her current solitude the only way to maintain control over her life? Only time will tell, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me on this deep, emotional, and sometimes painful journey through the life of a woman who refuses to be tamed by circumstances. If you enjoyed discovering the real story behind the persona, don't forget to subscribe to Las Famosas del Corazon to continue uncovering the best-kept secrets of your favorite stars. And don't go yet. On screen you'll see other videos from the channel that will captivate and surprise you as much as this one. Until the next story.